Hello, dear viewers and subscribers of my channel. Great to see you in a new video. And today, we will talk about how Germany got rich after the Second World War. Let us begin right with the main point. Post-war Germany was almost in ruins. Cities lay in rubble, factories were destroyed or partly dismantled, millions of people were refugees, and the national currency had practically collapsed. It seemed that it would take generations to build a new life. Yet within a single generation, West Germany transformed from a battered, fragmented territory into a powerful industrial state, a phenomenon that the world soon called the economic miracle, Wirtschaftswunder. In this account, we will go through the main stages of that transformation: destruction and occupation, currency and economic reform, external aid, domestic policy and growth drivers, and explain why much of what happened was far from a miracle, instead the result of concrete decisions and circumstances. In May 1945, Germany capitulated. The obvious consequences of the war were everywhere: railways in ruins, factories without equipment, the rural economy broken, food supplies rationed by coupon. Millions were left homeless, millions of economically active citizens were unemployed. Moreover, in the first post-war years, the Allies practiced demilitarization and denazification, and also partially dismantled certain enterprises to prevent the re-emergence of military industry. All this restrained recovery. But alongside destruction, there were institutional reconstruction windows. The Allies had resources and authority to influence how Germany would be rebuilt, and those decisions largely determined the trajectory of growth. Currency reform and the economic turning point. One of the most important steps, the one historians often call the starting point of genuine recovery, took place in mid-1948. The core of the reform was the introduction of a new currency, the German mark, Deutsche Mark, and a radical restructuring of the money supply and price policy. Day X, the 20th of June 1948, when the new currency appeared in the Tri-Zone, the three Western occupation zones, triggered a sharp revival of trade. Ration cards disappeared, availability of goods by weight noticeably increased, and the wartime hyperinflationary economy ended. The reform was accompanied by a loosening of price controls, a policy promoted in the economic administration by Ludwig Erhard. He believed that free prices would restore incentives for production and distribution. The introduction of the mark allowed Germany to work with external aid and enter a more normal economic logic. It is important to understand, currency reform by itself did not create factories or coal, but it removed a crucial constraint. When people have an economy of signals, prices, entrepreneurs gain incentives to raise production. Shops no longer looked like empty displays, and that had enormous psychological and material significance. External aid, the Marshall Plan, and its significance. Alongside the currency reform came external aid. The European Recovery Program, known as the Marshall Plan, officially the European Recovery Program, was adopted in early 1948 and represented a multi-billion-dollar assistance program for Western European countries. Over the period from April 1948 to June 1952, the United States provided tens of billions of dollars, in contemporary terms. For Germany, the aid amounted to more than $1.3 billion in grants and loans, which significantly accelerated deliveries of machinery, fuel, and food, and allowed the rebuilding of trade and industrial networks. The Marshall Plan was not the sole cause of recovery, but it, second to internal reforms in importance, provided critical capital, materials, and infrastructure injections that eased the transition to sustained growth. But perhaps more important than the sheer volume of money was the Marshall Plan's role in integrating Western European markets, stabilizing currencies, restoring logistics, and creating confidence in an investment environment. In addition, some measures encouraged the rapid removal of barriers and the creation of conditions for free trade, which opened markets for German exports. Inside the country, a key role was played by a new normal economic policy that would later be called the social market economy. Its architect, in the broad sense, was Ludwig Erhard, and the accompanying reforms, together with the political will of West Germany's first post-war leaders, especially Konrad Adenauer and others, created a context in which private initiative combined with social protection and institutional stabilization. That meant privatization, support for small and medium-sized businesses, price liberalization, and support for competition, alongside a social security system that softened social shocks. This combination preserved incentives for growth and avoided extremes that might have undermined political stability. Productivity, modernization, and the role of the Mittelstand. Economic growth relied on several technical drivers. First, Germany inherited a very strong engineering culture and a workforce with high skill levels. Second, the industrial base, despite the dismantling of some plants, still retained know-how and technology that could be quickly returned to production. Third, small and medium-sized enterprises, the Mittelstand, proved unusually important. Flexible, specialized firms resumed exports, often working in niches where high quality and engineering precision were required. The craft tradition and vocational education, the dual training system, made it possible to quickly train workers and technicians, which boosted productivity. German firms targeted export markets because domestic demand was limited. That required competitive advantages, high-quality standards, and engineering solutions. Alongside internal reforms, external factors accelerated recovery. One such event was the Korean War, which began in 1950. The sudden demand for industrial goods and raw materials in the early 1950s led to price rises and additional demand for German products, giving industry an extra boost. Also, the restoration of European trade links, the gradual stabilization of world markets, and Germany's integration into Western European logistics chains allowed rapid expansion of exports and technological upgrades. Financing industrial rebirth came through several channels: government programs, lines of credit, domestic savings, and international loans. The Marshall Plan directly supported infrastructure reconstruction, but banks also played a significant part, and after reforms they began to finance industrial projects. In addition, the preservation of some savings, debt restructuring, and subsequent agreements on international obligations, including a reduction in the burden of reparations and debt restructuring, freed resources for investment in modernization. These financial decisions created a foundation for sustainable industrial growth. One must not underestimate the institutional factor. West Germany created a stable legal system, a framework of labor relations, and respect for property, components without which investment will not materialize. Social stabilization played an important role. The alignment of modern legal norms, trade unions, and employers into agreed rules of the game reduced political instability and fostered effective coordination among enterprises, workers, and the state. Particularly successful sectors included mechanical engineering, automobile manufacturing, the chemical industry, and electronics. Brands and technologies became global. German machine tools, German automobiles, and chemical products were in high demand. Exports became the engine of growth. With domestic demand recovering and transfer payment restrictions in place, exports allowed the accumulation of foreign exchange reserves and the purchase of raw materials. Post-war demography played a dual role. A large influx of refugees and evacuees from eastern territories provided Germany with extra labor. Later, the stream of guest workers from Italy and other countries supplemented the labor market as demand for production personnel grew. Over time, a balance was reached between employment, productivity, and migration flows, which supported industrial expansion. Economic recovery was underpinned by a social attitude. Many citizens were motivated to work intensively, save, and invest in the future. The growth economy required discipline and professionalism, qualities historically present among German craftsmen and engineers. Industrial culture, combining quality and organization, provided a competitive edge. Political stability under Adenauer's Christian Democratic Party, European integration, the European coal and steel community as a precursor, and later economic cooperation, membership in NATO and alignment with the West provided security and access to markets and capital. Germany's economy was embedded in the Western politico-military system, which reduced risks and secured long-term partnerships. Conclusion: a high-speed economy and a miracle that had causes. In summary, the phenomenon of the Wirtschaftswunder is a combination of reforms, external support, internal discipline, and favorable external demand conditions. Currency reform and the removal of price controls provided the start. The Marshall Plan and international aid provided materials and capital. The social market economy and policy created institutions and stimulated entrepreneurship. Global events, including trade demand and the Korean War, supplied additional opportunities. Professional culture and the Mittelstand created manufacturing advantages. This was not magic nor merely American help. It was the result of many interacting factors. Germany truly got rich, but that wealth was built on hard choices, institutional reforms, and favorable international conditions. History teaches that recovery is possible when the right economic signals, political will, and international cooperation come together.